Hi everyone, I'm back for the fourth video from the Quilters Guild of Ireland home series. We're making these videos to support a request to you, our members, as well as friends and family and neighbors and whoever might be interested in participating, to make 10-inch finished blocks on the theme of home. So we're supplying patterns for 3 variations of a house, a tree, or garden paths, or paths and gardens. And some of these are kind of abstract representations. Some of them are more obvious, but you could do whatever you like, and you can change the colors around as you see fit. We're asking you to use batiks if possible, only because batiks generally go together well regardless of the colors. They tend to work well together. However, if you don't have batiks, please feel free to take part anyway. The more the merrier. We're going to use these blocks to make some quilts, which we'll use to help out women in distress and mental health facilities. So without further ado, as I said, this is the fourth block. It's the second house block, and it's probably not really much more complicated than the last one. I think it has one little tiny piece that might make it a little bit trickier, but really not very difficult at all. So you can see the block is here on the left side of the screen. I've got it laid out with all the pieces cut, so I'm absolutely clear about what I'm going to be sewing together. I think this is something I would advise doing if you haven't done a pattern before, that if you lay everything out, you kind of have a sense of where things are going. Obviously, if you're following instructions that say otherwise, you can follow those instructions, but in this case, I just would recommend it. It's harder to get confused if you do this. So I am going to sew this together now, and I'm going to start with these window and wall pieces, we'll call them, right here, these 3 and these 3, which I can then sew to this little piece underneath, and then I can sew those units to the door, and then this section will get sewn to this wall, and that section will get sewn to the roof, and then I'll sew this little chimney onto the sky, and then add that to the house, and finally add the 2 bits of sky to the side. So I am sewing today on my very basic straight stitch sewing machine. It's nothing special, nothing extraordinary. I have, however, set it to a 2 millimeter stitch length. I find that is a little bit better when doing patchwork, because you're less likely to have the seams pull apart at the edge. I'm using Aurifil 50 weight thread. It's my personal favorite, but you can use whatever you'd like. And and I'm using a neutral color, which is, it's kind of a taupey color. And I have a size 75 Microtex needle in the machine. So because I'm doing the same section repeated, I'm going to chain piece that. And I'll take the piece from the other side. And I can now cut off the first piece. And I'm going to just finger press that very gently with my fingernail. And I'll now add the other side. The downside to these really vibrant colors is it's sometimes hard to keep track of what is supposed to be the wall and what is supposed to be the window, which is the other reason for laying it out. Then you're less likely to get confused. As I said, you can use whatever colors you like. Don't be bound by my choices, which are sometimes a wee bit garish. And You can use warmer colors or darker colors or more muted colors. It's really up to yourself. We will try to put them all together in quilts and make them work well together. So this is the wall section. And to this, I'm now going to add a little bit of wall underneath. Excuse me. Sometimes people ask if there's a right or wrong side to batiks. If you look at the batik carefully, you can see this side and this side look slightly different. This side is a little bit fuzzier, a little bit more faded looking. This one is a little bit crisper. The more crisp side would be the right side. However, with some of them, you really can't tell the difference. And if you can't tell the difference, don't worry about it. Use whichever side. It doesn't make any difference. But sometimes you can see quite a clear difference, as you can with this pink. If you can see the difference, then try to use, to have the right side used as the... No, I shouldn't say that. You can use either side, just be consistent in what you use. So if I use the more faded side as the house, then I should do that consistently throughout. You can always use the wrong side of fabrics when sewing patchwork. Sometimes the wrong side has a feel that's slightly better for the project you might be working on. I'm now going to add the doors. So this is the door going in the middle. And this one, I really can't see any right or wrong side. So I'm just going to sew it on. And again, this has only one piece, so it wouldn't really matter if I used the right or wrong side. As before, I generally sew a couple stitches, make sure my seam is lined up, and then fire away down the seam. So I'm now going to use a little scrap of fabric to putting the scrap of fabric there helps to prevent those little snarls that you sometimes get at the beginning of the seam. And I generally do that when I'm doing patchwork piecing. It just makes life a little bit tidier, makes the piecing a little bit tidier. So now I have the walls, the windows, and the doors at the bottom of the house all assembled. So to this, I'm going to add the little wall above the windows. And again, I'll match up that first corner. And this one, the end of it is out of the side of the camera, but I'm going to match up the end again, give a little tug, make sure that everything is lined up, that my seam allowance is where I want them to be. I will sew along, again checking my seam allowances. You could pin, which would probably save you having to check your seam allowances and make these adjustments as you're sewing. It's probably 6 one, half dozen the other. If you're more comfortable pinning, do so. I'm just kind of lazy, so I don't pin that often. saying that, there are times you absolutely cannot get away without pinning, but we won't go into that right now. And that's the top of the house sewn on. Again, I'm going to give it a nice, I'm putting very little pressure on when I'm finger pressing this. I don't want to distort it or stretch it with my fingers. And that is something quite nice about batiks, is they're generally a Pimatex, and there are Pima cotton. They're quite a fine weave, and they crease very nicely. So you can finger press them really, really easily. So this is the roof, which I'm adding on. And again, I'm going to match those two points at the bottom and just hold this. This one has no seams as I'm going along, so I can kind of fly through this. I'm going to go a wee bit faster, just making sure everything is lined up, and then I can speed along again. And that's the house put together. So now we just have to add the chimney and the sky. So I have a little chimney piece, which is just a little 1.5 inch piece. And I'm going to sew that to a stretch of the sky. And I'm going to just press that seam allowance and then add this to the top of the roof. So this house is kind of inspired by some of the cottages you see around here in Cork, where they may have a chimney on one side or both sides of the house, and they generally have a door with a window either side of the door. Sometimes a chimney would be in the middle as well. We have we live in a cottage which we've extended, and the original cottage has that structure of a door with a window on either side, and a kind of high wall above the windows, and then there's a floor above with roof lights in the very old cottage. So this is the roof the sky added to the roof. So then all we have left are these two pieces to go either side of the block, and then it's finished. So I'll do this one first. And again, I'm going to match this corner. Do a couple of stitches, and then go down and match the end. And I'll line up everything as I go. So I'm holding the end of the seams in my right hand, and I'm checking to make sure the seam allowances are turned where I want them to be. My pin stuck there, and then press this, and then add this one. Just going to check the colors on this. This side is slightly lighter, and I've used the brighter side on here and here, so I'm going to do the same on this one. So again, I'll match this corner. and I'll finger press this, and I'm going to take this to the iron and give it a quick press, and then I'll come back and do the stay stitching. Okay, I've given it a quick press, and I'm just going to do a little seam or a little bit line of sewing along the edges to make sure nothing pulls apart in transit and while it's being handled. So just go in about an 1/8 of an inch, a 1/16 of an inch, tiny bit off the seam, just to kind of sew those seams closed, as we generally don't lock our seams in patchwork. This long edge, it's really not necessary to do, but as I've got the block under the machine, I'll just continue on. And I'm actually going to stop here because there's no seams along this long edge. And snip off my little tabs, and that's it. That's the second house, and this should measure, fingers crossed, it should measure 10.5 inches, and when it's sewn to their blocks it will measure 10 inches then. So good luck. When you make your block, contact the QGI at gmail.com or contact the Quilters Guild of Ireland through Facebook, and we'll tell you what to do with the blocks, where to send them, who to send them with. And don't forget that for every block you make, your name will go into a draw, and we'll be drawing 50 prizes, and in honor of the 50th anniversary of the Design and Crafts Council. And those prizes will be going to all the people who make the blocks. So thank you very much, and I'll see you for the next video.